And we must not forget, we have been talking all this time about what is happening to us, or what Gorbachev accomplished. However, the reality was that simultaneously our Western allies, and I'm not referring solely to the Americans, who were not involved at all, and now we must aid the Germans in their unification. In Britain, it was said and written that we had beaten them twice, and now they are back again. And François Mitterrand was deeply uncertain. In fact, he wrote a complete book at the end of his term to express that he was actually in favor of it. However, at that time he was not. He was conflicted. On one hand, he was already aware that it was an unimaginable situation to rip his people apart. But for French politics, especially at the Quai d'Orsay, it was a reality. He was not far from Grobiko. And Margaret Thatcher, as one might expect, said it openly. A few weeks later, they sent the then Dutch government. A few weeks later, they sent the Dutch government of that time. They insisted on holding a peace conference, which could have been forgotten if everyone had just moved on. Warring powers of the Second World War. During the World War, over 110 nations declared war in the last 10 days, not due to a sudden opposition to Hitler and the Germans, but rather because they had stolen patents. I am a free man, so I can talk about it more openly now. And that's why it was crucial when we then, in October and again in December,
promised at Strasbourg, the EGG.
That was the most miserable thing I experienced in my entire career in Europe.
That was a tribunal for you, yes.
It was a tribunal, the standard EU summit, under the usual French leadership. Normally, it would have been a nice event with good food and drink. Instead, I always felt like I was entering as if I were on trial, except for Philip González, the sole supporter in Europe, and Jacques Delors, who always stood by us and said, "This must be, this is your right." Everyone else was thus, between coldness, how very frosty and rejecting, and it. The fear was simply spreading, and we must not forget that many believed it was time to leave. The neutralization of the Federal Republic of a united Germany is now upon us. If they exit NATO, the European community will collapse. Everything was in vain. Fear was already rampant and had been greatly intensified. And then we need to look at the following weeks were a feverish activity. I only caught bits and pieces of it. François Mitterrand had a meeting with Margaret Thatcher, and they definitely didn't recite the rosary. François Mitterrand...
Before that, Mitterrand was with
He was in Kiev with Gorbachev, and then the Poles acted as best they could. Then a whole different, very painful question emerged. We had always maintained the thesis in German politics up to the Federal Constitutional Court. Potsdam is not a final judgment. The borders of the Federal Republic of Germany will be determined by a peace treaty. This has always been our stance. And after a while, it became clear that there would be no peace treaty in the foreseeable future. We managed to live with that. We never thought that this chance would come tomorrow. However, if a peace treaty had been mentioned in early 1990, the door was open for a few months, the window was open for a while. This can be easily established today, proven. It wouldn't have worked out at all. Instead, we had to see how we could get there. And then, of course, reality struck. Germany's and Europe's situation over our Rhine, Jordanian border.
And you allowed yourself to be pressured for a long time.
Yes.
You were also blamed for doing it, to steal votes from the Republicans.
I did it to secure a majority. The ones who pressured us at that time did not face the same circumstances. We lost one-third of the German Reich territory due to the Second World War, which the Nazis unleashed in 1945. Not just any territory that the Nazis had taken. Königsberg and Breslau. And no one can argue that these were not cities. And no one can say they weren't cities, which have traditionally been linked to the history and life of Germany. More than 12.5 million individuals lost their country, their homes, their farms, and their sense of belonging. This has been an incredibly bitter experience for millions of people. This remains true for many even today. We knew, of course, it is clear that questioning borders in Europe jeopardizes peace. But for me, it was clear that I must connect the recognition of the Jordanian border to the displaced and many others with the question, are you? It may seem demagogic, but I stand by it. This was my key question in my parliamentary faction. Where I confronted them strongly, I said, we cannot do this. I told them, you must simply state, are you making a request in the Bundestag? We oppose allowing 17 million Germans into Germany, and we do not accept the Jordanian border for this. Or you say, we should live together with the 17 million, and for that we pay the price of history with the Jordanian border. If someone were to ask me what I consider a masterpiece, I would say, during the voting process regarding the Jordanian border in the German Bundestag, there were fewer than 20 votes against it that opposed it. This, after all, marked the end of a chapter in German history, and not the chance that was brought, who quickly said, you must. I have always said, I give my word that I will do it. However, we need to decide the timing ourselves. And then it was really not an issue.